Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. You'll find a slightly different podcast this week because we only had, checks notes, 2 games that were played in the top flight this week. One was given the heave-ho due to weather, and the other ones were rescheduled as a number of the teams had players called up for international duty. Some for the full men's teams, some for underage sides. That seems to be happening more and more. Is it a good enough reason to move Irish League games? We're totally allowed to do it. Or should we consider an international break in the Irish League? Didn't expect that. We'll also look at how we're developing players for the Northern Ireland side on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. It's quite nice this week that I'm actually having a debut on the podcast, a brand new guest. He is someone who you're probably aware of from either being on an Irish League pitch, being on an Irish League sideline, or recently as a voice across TV and radio. Hello and welcome to the pod, Matthew Tipton.
Thanks for having me on, Peter. I know it's been a while. I think you had asked me a long time ago to come on, but I was probably in management stage and just finished. And the last thing I want to do is maybe talk about Irish League football at that stage. But look, I'm happy now, and I'm happy that it's going well for you as well.
Many moons ago, I think that was the very first series. That's about Irish League lore, which is popping out for the podcast. But nowadays, year 2025. Like I said, we're seeing you pop up doing a bit of radio and TV, which you're great at because you have so much passion, so much insight when it comes to the game. But what are you actually doing at the minute? Because obviously we're not seeing you at the sidelines.
What am I actually doing? Like I say, I'm enjoying doing the commentary side, to be honest. Football-wise, I suppose, I'm working with the IFA at the minute and have been since I stepped away from my hands. Andy Waterworth was good enough to touch base with me, got me in. We had a couple of chats and started in it was a new program at that stage, a technical development program with a kind of better under 13s and under 14 players, and that led on, and then I moved within the MPP, which is the National Player Programme. For those that don't know, which a lot of people might not, there's 4 regional centres within Northern Ireland, 1 Northwest, there's 1 in Fermanagh, 1 in Mid Ulster, which is based in Portadown at Anna's ground, and there's a Belfast centre as well. So there's 4 centres there. So last year I was working within the Belfast centre, and then when they move post-Christmas, then it's kind of selected into a national squad under Michael McLean's guidance last year, and I went up and assisted him and went on a couple of trips and things. And then at the end of last season, I was asked would I take charge of that under 14 squad. So what I do on a week-to-week basis is just travel around each centre, different centre each week, keep my eye on what's going on, join in a little bit of coaching. Prior now, I'll be selecting squad in the new year to help prep them. And then these are the children that are within the age group to be selected for the JD Academy, which is the school based at Campbell College, which Chris Lindsay heads up with Michael McLean. And they're obviously in there full time. So I have to give kind of reports on each player, every player that I get out to watch, try and get to 2 or 3 games each weekend, just to build up a database of players, as well as obviously the coaching side of it. So it keeps me busy enough in terms of what I want to do, and it's massively enjoyable watching these young children on their pathways and their progress.
What you're saying is you don't miss the cut and thrust of full adult Irish League management and everything that comes with it?
No, not at all. Look, and I've been asked this numerous times. I have been on a couple of different podcasts and I speak, when I do the radio and things. And look, I did really enjoy my management time, but it's not something I'm looking to rush back into now. I never say never. I never say never to anything. But it would take a lot of things for it to be right for me. I would need a lot of stars to align for me to go back into management. And probably what I'm looking for is the perfect role that isn't going to come. So I'm not going to go back because basically I'd want a solid club. I'd want somewhere where their own training facilities, a good youth structure, a board or a club or a backing that aligns with myself in terms of wanting a build for the future. It's not just about here and today. And I think that's why maybe I'm more suited to the youth side of the game, the technical development programs, rather than just trying to look for an instant result tomorrow type of thing. I see a future in football. I think there's more to it than just trying to win today, in my eyes. But look, at first team management, I understand is about that, and I've done it. So I've had success at it. It's not like I've done it and never won a game, and that's why I'm going down this route. I think people, whilst I didn't have a great success at Ards, I think people forget that I did have success. At one point we won the league at absolute canter, and they were more than safe when I left to take the Portadown job.
It's totally spoken as a man who's never really been involved in anything above school football. I mean, it's clearly different skill sets. Hopefully I won't compare apples and oranges too much, because I have a bit of connections with the music industry and kind of management and A&R and kind of talent development and all the rest. It's very different skills, and we see in modern football at the very, very top end a manager versus a head coach and stuff like that. Like, clearly being able to motivate and bring a team together compared to getting into the minutiae of coaching and tactics, it is very much different, and some people are very much set up to be one or the other. It's not like they are like jobs which one's above the other. It's more of a, what can you provide the most value in?
Yeah. Obviously, my skills are for other people to judge and decide. It's not for me to come on here to say, oh, like, I'm a brilliant coach, because I don't think I am a brilliant coach. I'll be totally honest.
Oh, come on! You're a footballer who was competitive, that scored hundreds of goals, hundreds of appearances. So don't come at me and go, oh, I guess I'm just okay. I mean, you are sitting there as a coach trying to motivate potentially the guys you're going to take this Northern Ireland, this future team. Like we saw the Northern Ireland team on Friday night. The result didn't go their way. The young fellas you're talking to will hopefully be in that side X amount of years from now, and you're going to be the ones to give them that drive and that hunger. So,
this is what I'm saying. I'm there to lay the foundations. I'm the very first layer of their journey, right? But they're coming into me because they've had brilliant starts to their young footballing careers, right? Through the youth coaches, wherever they've started, the clubs that they're currently playing with, they see them a lot more than what we do within the IFA. Like, and I'm not trying to deflect here, right? Because if I've no good players or whatever, it's not at all. What I'm saying is there's a lot of people that go to make the thing. And do you know who the most important out of all of them is? The player themselves. They're the ones. They have the ability, the God-given ability, 99 times out of 100, this is born into them. And then how they use that and progress with it is purely down to them. All we can do is offer our guidance as best as we can, right? And I'll be there. And look, there's certain things I think, right, okay, I'm good at that, or I might be able to explain that and help them. And that's all I want to do. I want them all. Like, every single kid I see, I want to go on to be the best, right? So the best for them might be playing for Liverpool, Real Madrid, like we've seen with Conor Bradley playing obviously against Real Madrid there for Liverpool, came through the program, came through the pathway, right? But some of the children might end up playing, right? And no disrespect, they might be playing the amateur league, right? If that's the best that they've done, and they feel like I've given them everything they can to be the best. Like, not everybody's built to play for Liverpool. Not everybody's built to play for Linfield within the Irish League. That's the way football works. Unfortunately, I just want to hopefully have a positive impact on that with them. And that goes, I was the exact same when I was first team manager, right? Sam Glanfield scored the winner for the under-21s on Thursday night, wasn't it? He played the under-21s, right? He scored the winning goal last weekend for Watford to keep him in the league. I take as much pride from watching that, knowing that I had a little star or help, in his career, obviously, at Portadown. Same with Lee Bonus. Every time he scores for Chesterfield, I feel a sense of pride with that. And look, they're just two of the boys. Everybody, people that maybe started off at Portadown and they've ended up different places, and maybe the careers didn't go the way they wanted at Warren Point. But see, when I look at them boys and they score and they do well, I try and react to it, be it through Instagram or a text message or a WhatsApp, to say well done, because I do have that kind of that connection, but it maybe like I say, it's not a first team connection now, but you still want them all to do well.
We will get on to Irish League stuff. We've just kind of went down this little path here, because it's interesting, right? Because the players that are now lighting up this league, and clearly we have gotten better at developing players in this country because we're seeing them move on a lot more, and it's been a real topic of discussion on this podcast and within league circles. Obviously, I think Lee Bonus is one of the real success stories. You can even add in Hale and McMenamin, kind of at different ages and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But even at a younger age, they're breaking into the league and then shooting on. When you get to the level of 14, which just seems so young, like, what is it that you're trying to teach them technical skills and all the rest,
Yeah.
but it is so much right now about getting the mindset right, the technical ability. What are we doing now that's improving young players to give them the platform to move on?
So I suppose within our program, right, we're still looking very much at the technical side of football, right? I think we can get bogged down with too much tactics, right? Now we have to give it.
See, I've heard this as well, that sometimes at youth level, it just ends up being passing around the back, and it's all very, it doesn't really develop the actual player in a game.
No. So if you look, right, at any level of football, basically, we're going completely off where we were planning to go, aren't we, with this? So from my point of view, right, this is not the IFA, by the way, right? So I don't expect, I'm heading off on holiday in the morning. I don't want Andy ringing me to say, why are you saying, right? So this is Matthew Tipton's thoughts on youth football, right? Not the IFA. Basically, we want to produce better 1v1 players, right? So that means that you can receive the ball in tight situations, right? When you've got the ball, you can beat or outmaneuver your defender. In turn, that will then produce better defenders because we're encouraging more 1v1 play, right? So I want to encourage my attacking players to get out defenders, which in turn helps improve them defensively, because you just mentioned it, right? If we're just watching people pass, right, what happens is the game becomes passive, right? So we're not engaging anybody. We're losing a little bit of aggression. We're not encouraging people to make tackles, because it's all about setup, shape, organisation, right? And this will lead on to Irish League, because it becomes boring, doesn't it? Let's be honest. Everybody's doing the same thing, right? But guess what? As you go up the levels, right, these bigger countries, bigger nations, they can do all of that, and they can be dynamic. We have to remember, right, we're a small nation. We don't have the amount of players that Spain or even England or France have, right? So we need to make sure that we're giving them a little bit of everything. We want to keep in the natural ability to want to run, which, all the British Isles players have that natural inclination to want to run and challenge, but we also have to ally it with technical excellence, I suppose, from our point of view. Receiving skills have to be on point. Our passing skills, ball speed is massive. Something Andy's introduced, the 3Bs. So it's ball speed, ball control, and body shape. They're the three basics that you have to be nailing into the young players, because without them, you're not going to really progress anyway, because you won't be able to look after the ball, which in turn, you'll not get your 1v1 situations. So, yeah, the short version is basically be good on the ball. And if you're good on the ball, that will encourage your defenders to get better.
Well, if we look at the youth setup, and that's really taken from a central IFA level, that seems to be on the up, where there's a greater focus, and hopefully we can maybe claim that there's improvement. I know every time you see the graphic for the Northern Ireland team, there's little logos. Yes, there's little sport suppliers there saying, oh yeah, he was a part of our system, and that comes into the academy and getting them in young.
Well, it's massive, because with the backing from JD and UEFA and alongside the IFA with this program, right, we're getting more contact time with the children. I understand you said there, age of 14 is really young to be getting them in, right? So we're trying to replicate a little bit what happened.
Is it not just all the big lads? Come on. The ones that
this is the total opposite. No, that's what you think. So look, we could go down a massive rabbit hole about this, but when I generally go out and watch games, I don't look at size or anything. I look at the technical excellence. Right? So the first thing I look at, can they receive and go both ways with the ball? Right? Don't matter what position you play in the pitch, because centre half's receiving the ball off the goalkeeper. What's their body shape like? Can they receive? Can they open up? Can they move the ball left or right foot to play off both feet? But then as you move up the pitch, can our midfield and our forward players see the ability to go both ways? Once you can do that, you have a chance. So Conor McMenamin, you referenced him, right? He's probably the best that I've seen within this country. I played with him as a young player at Linfield and thought he was magnificent. And obviously I took him on at one point. I signed him there to play for me for a while. And he has that, grace about him. He travels with the ball brilliantly. He can shift off left and right foot. I'm not saying I want every player to be like Conor McMenamin, but it's a good template for people to have, watching young players. They should be able to receive and go use the ball off both feet, be it just to create a half yard, or if they're fantastic and they can beat 3 or 4, then all the better. But it's not just all the big kids. But if I've got a big kid that can do all of them things, then yes, so much better.
I would be a proponent of this, but maybe you disagree. We've seen a bit of a minor revolution at the top of the Irish League now that we have these full-time sides. You might say that the emergence of Lauren, the investment there has maybe pushed other teams to try and catch up. Would you say, because you came into the Irish League around 15 years ago, when you joined Portadown, would you say the Irish League's better now than it was 15 years ago?
No.
You genuinely don't think there's better players in the Irish League
No.
right now than there was 15 years ago?
So I bet you could name 5 players quickly now, right? That like standout players, right? Like individual actions, Kevin Braniff, Gary Hamilton, these type of players, right? That were ripping it up there. I think now there's probably better organised teams, but I don't see that I don't think it's a better spectacle at the minute. Right. I don't know so I did a podcast, it was probably a year ago or maybe more, right? And I said, what will happen? The more full-time teams that come into the Irish League, the more boring the football will become, right? Because teams will be set up to be organised, right? Organisation it's boring. When
I hear Linfield fans nodding in approval.
Well, I don't,
because that's their big complaint.
Is it right? Okay, and I'm not being disrespectful to any fans here. I generally don't know what fans say. I don't do Facebook or anything, so I don't know what fans are thinking. Right? I can only think, and I'm only giving my opinion, what I see. Right? So if that's what Linfield fans are thinking, well, that's fine. But that's what I look at the teams. Now, I would say the one team this year that I've seen, and I don't watch 6 games every Saturday. I try and, I catch up with everybody's highlights as, that's just a football thing. And obviously, if I'm out watching a game, be it for the BBC or for my own piece, the best that I've seen this season has been Coleraine. And I think they were dynamic. They did look like they wanted to be adventurous on and off the ball going forward. So they look like, in terms of their full-time model, they look like they're doing a lot of attacking play and they're really good going forward. I think Will Patchin's, fantastic player. But on that note of it, it comes from being so organised off the ball. They have the back 4. They have Dylan Boyle that just sits and covers. Anybody is out of position, Dylan Boyle fills in for them. And I'm obviously going to be, not obviously going to be biased, but I coached Dylan as a young fella, so I love him. You know what I mean? I have a connection with him, and I watch him playing, and I think, geez, he's some player, that boy. But, you do become a little bit biased when you have, you've had a part in their coaching or in their playing career. So they're the ones, but everybody else looks very formulaic. Everything's set up. It's pretty easy to defend against because you kind of know what the patterns are going to be, and they're set up. 9 times out of 10, teams are looking to me like they're set up not to be beat rather than to go in hell for leather. Where 15 years ago, we'd trained Tuesday and Thursday and we just turned up and we're going for the win and that was it.
And that probably comes from the sense of maybe it's further scrutiny online. I mean, a team cannot, I know you say you avoid it, but if you are manager X and a team that's losing a couple in a row, or because you haven't been defensively sound, and I think we've seen some dodgy play at the back over the past few weeks, you might go, oh, well, if I can just avoid that and be boring, maybe sneak a goal, what's the problem here? Well, you've Stephen Baxter. Was that not kind of what his dynasty was built on?
The easiest thing, right? Easiest thing that I didn't do, clearly, but the easiest thing, right, as a manager, as a coach, is to make your team hard to beat, right? Scoring goals is the hardest thing in football. To set up your team to be organised and disciplined, right? It's quite easy as a coach to do that. The real difficult thing as a coach, as a manager, whatever you want to call yourself, is being creative to create opportunities to score goals. Maybe, like I say, maybe I should have concentrated on that first, but I wanted my teams to be exciting. I wanted to have a goal, wanted to be known as a goal scoring team. And I always used to think, well, being honest, I don't know if even if we sat back for 90 minutes, we would be able to contain the opposition anyway, because levels of where I was managing, in terms of predominantly, obviously, as a championship team, it was fine. We were going flying up the league. But when I was in the Premier League as a manager, it was going to be in the bottom six, more than likely. As a newly promoted team twice, everybody's expecting you to be right down at the bottom. So that means you're buying or signing defenders that probably aren't good enough to defend for 90 minutes. So go for it hell for leather. But it's gone now, and there's so much more data available. We've so much more online analyst stuff where we can, see why scout, and we can pick and dissect as we need as managers and coaches. That's why the game does become a little bit more boring, because you're just being formulaic with it.
But when you say then the Irish League isn't as good now as it was 15 years ago, is that from an entertainment point of view purely?
Yes. Yeah.
But are the players not technically better? With Matthew, if you took Matthew Shevin right now and stuck him into Coleraine 2011,
yeah, do you think he's better than Rory Patterson? No, he isn't. Right, and Rory was 10 times better technically than Matthew. I played with Matthew as a young kid, came through at 15, 16 at Ballymena. I played with him, and hopefully, I helped him quite a bit, as an experienced centre forward at that stage, trying to help him. But Matthew's, I wouldn't say he's blessed technically. I'd say he's physically very good. He's energetic. He closes down really well. He runs onto through balls, but I wouldn't say he's technically brilliant. No, and I would say that there 2011. So I said Rory Patterson. I think he might have just left before 2011, but I think Rory's better than him.
So then, why do we now have a situation where we have 4 teams that are full-time, paying on average higher wages than ever before?
Yeah. Why is that? Because they've got more money. There's more European money. It's obviously come into the game. They've had investors in Larne and Coleraine, Glentoran to a certain extent as well. Linfield have always had the money because of the size of the football club. They have more fans through the gates. They sell more shirts. They have been winning the league on average for a lot longer than everybody else. They've won more titles. So they've built up the bank of money. So purely and simply money, isn't it? That's the long and short answer of everything. The more money you have, if you manage it properly in terms of signing players, what you're doing with it, you will be more successful than somebody without money.
But they're paying more. Could they? I guess it's just if you have one side at the top that are able to sign all the best players, you could probably argue that Linfield of 15 years ago were able to do just that, sign the best 20 players, and whatever the going rate was what was being paid, and they could trot that out there. And it's somewhat been a bit of an arms race, particularly at the top end of the league, where, like, for example, a couple of years ago there when Lee Bonus was sold for 100 grand to Larne.
Yep.
Like, is that the going rate for a player? Well, it is when.
But he won them the league Larne 2 years in a row, didn't he?
Yeah.
So how much did that make back? Then they sold him on and made a profit, right? So was the 100,000 worth it? Everything has a value, doesn't it? It's only worth it after the fact, right? So when Lee went there, and the first year they obviously didn't win it, and then they won the league 2 years in a row, that 100,000 was well worth it, wasn't it? Because how much did they make from qualifying? Firstly, for the Champions League, as we would call it, for the group stages, and then the qualifying stages. Sorry, and then the year after they actually got into the Europa Conference League. So how much did they make from that? I'm not saying it was all down to Lee, by the way, but he was a massive help in terms of that, right? So that investment of £100,000 for Lee, if you looked at the bare facts, he helped them win the league, and that in turn helped them win the league the year after because they got more money. And then that year they qualified to the Conference League, sold him prior to playing, and once they qualified, they sold him. So the 100,000 started there, and it made them £5 million. I'm not saying it did make them five, but you understand what I'm saying? So then it's worth it. If they signed Lee for £100,000 and he got injured or he didn't score enough goals and they didn't win the league, well, then it's a waste of money, isn't it? And it's not worth £100,000.
If we're looking at then the Irish League right now, where we have 4 full-time clubs at the top of Larne, Linfield, Glentoran, and now Coleraine, and as much as you believe perhaps the absolute man-for-man quality overall isn't at the same level as a decade or so ago, do you then see it that because there's been some suggestions over the past few years that we are taking step by step, moving into something that looks like a full time top tier. Um, it took a while for the League of Ireland to get there. I mean, it's starting to sound like we're getting to the point where that maybe, well, many people say that isn't economically viable, right? But
No,
are we maybe looking at a two Irish league economy where there's the economy for signing for one of
yes.
the top three or four, however that they may stay. I know that's what we have at the minute,
Hmm.
but like, what does the Irish league look like moving
Well,
forward if the quality's getting better
look, I'm
from a
not
technical
saying
point
that.
of view?
Yeah, I'm not saying right that the league's in a bad way or anything at all.
No,
What I'm saying is I don't think we've as many flair players as what we had, right? But it's certainly more professional. So teams are going to be more they're fitter, quicker, stronger. There's the first three things that happen when you go full time, right? Them three things should be a given.
and is that
Should.
what's making our players more attractive then to move across?
I don't know. Is there more players going now than what went 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, I would recall maybe it's 20 years ago the idea of Peter Thompson going across to Stockport. Wow, the best player in the league who's been the top scorer for
Yeah.
a couple of seasons
Yeah.
moving across. This is, and everyone's checking Stockport County results for a while, hoping that he's gonna be the next flow of these great players.
Yeah.
Joe Gormley was the next one. Liam Boyce maybe came
Yeah,
slightly
because
shorter.
Stuart Dallas went, didn't he, at that stage, and then Liam had went to Werder Bremen and back, and then obviously went on and had a brilliant career.
Gavin White.
Gavin White went. Paul Smith obviously went from Linfield. Look, there always has been players going, and there always will be. Do you know why? Because ability is ability, right? All what I think is happening now, maybe not in a rush to go so early, right? So a lot of people would have went then. Then allied to the fact is that a lot of Irish league teams now are based within the college program, which is something I think is brilliant. So it means they can stay here to their further education up to the age of 18. They're then getting more full-time training. So they're not leaving home at 16. So maybe at 18, they've had a taste of first team football, which for me enables them to sustain a career in England longer than it going at 16, just as a run-of-the-mill type of player, because they're just an influx of 10 or 15 at each club each season. Right? If you've had a ground in a first team football and played 30, 40 men's games, 16, 17, 18, I think that'll enable you to sustain a career in England longer. So we might be seeing more of that. The JD Academy helps because they're obviously in there training full time at 14 as well. So there's more than one reason why it looks like it's more attractive. I don't see that there's a big, massive difference of Irish League players going that what went. But what I do think is when they go now, they're sustaining it because of for the full time reasons. They may be getting the more full time football as a younger player, and also now it's an attractive proposition, right, for players coming from England, Scotland, or further afield. You know, Land brought a couple of boys from Gibraltar, obviously, because that's where Nathan knew that market. Because they can come here, play full time with the opportunity to play in Europe. It was something that I did, and now I know, but there wasn't the full time aspect at that stage. Because playing in League One and League Two, where I played my career, no chance of, well, number one, right, you've hardly a chance of winning anything. Right, you know, promotions, and I get that, and you've a chance of winning your own individual league. But in terms of getting to an FA Cup final, zero chance. League Cup final, zero chance. You might get. It used to be called the LDV Vans Trophy. I don't know what Johnson Bank Trophy, possibly, right? The Virtue Trophy now. So you have a possibility, right? But see, coming here in a 12-team league, right? If you're already going to one of the top teams, you've a great chance of being successful, and then you've got the massive prospect of playing in Europe. 4 clubs qualify for Europe. So if you're a lower league player coming from England or, you know, Scotland, to come here with all that package put together, a chance of success, Europe, cups, leagues, everything else that brings with it, right? And also not as intense, let's be honest. I know it's a 38-game season, right? You're playing 46 league games in England, add in all the cups. So you're probably looking at a 55 to 60-game season, where here it's 38 games, couple of cup competitions. But I'm going to be honest, there's a lot less intensity, isn't there? And if you're one of the full-time teams, you can probably take your foot off the gas a few at stages during the season anyway.
Well, if we're looking at this weekend, now it's a mix of a few things, right? So clearly,
Yep.
rain like mad. We talked about there some of the Northern Ireland, games there. The under 21s, had their go on the wet
Yeah.
mud bath of the Oval, and look, money's going in there. I mean, how many times do we see these games being called off the Oval
Yeah.
due to rain? You look outside, you can almost stick your finger in the air and go, I can smell a reschedule. That's something that's a long going problem, and
I
look,
think that was poor, wasn't it? Poor schedule from the IFA hosting the game at the Oval agreeing to it, and then also requesting that their game move to a Friday night. Look, we live in a country, right? It rains. It's November, right? Don't need to call it Storm Claudia or Storm Simon or whatever name you want to call these. It's just November weather now, right? It's going to rain probably. 2 games in 24 hours isn't going to happen. Oh, look, and not just Glentoran, by the way. Loads of grass pitches in the country wouldn't survive the deluge that came down Thursday to play then and the following day. So I just thought that was a little bit naive and poor to schedule that game for then. Look, they did, and that's the way it is. But I actually asked the question to a couple of people the other day: is it time for the Irish League to open up an international break? Because there's so many boys getting called up.
yeah, you see, you have to ask this now.
Have I stole your
No, no,
question?
no. Well, no,
It's your show.
well, the international break thing.
If you want to delete that bit and then ask me, and then I'll.
No, it's more of a. I'm glad you brought that up, Matthew, because
Right, okay.
this is something which I think fans are starting to go. So Linfield can't play their game because Isaac Bird's away with the youth squad.
Under 21s, right? So there's a
is this okay?
sliding
Is
scale.
this good enough now that yeah?
And it happens in England, right? So when you're there, if 2 players are called up for under 21 duty, the game gets called off. So that's the way of the world, right? They're UEFA rules. It's not just Linfield, or Lan, or Glentoran, or Dungannon, or any of these teams. They haven't just decided that, right? UEFA have put this rule in place because they don't want the league being devalued, right, by losing your best players. So you shouldn't get penalised, right, for having players getting selected for international football. That's the long and short of it, isn't it?
Okay, but
for me, Glenavon, right, have Paul McGovern, who last week scored 2, was man of the match, right, against Glentoran, was superb. Paul's away with the under-19s yesterday. So Michael O'Connor missed his best player, right? That's up for debate. Is he or isn't he his best player, right? I'm just giving him as an example because he scored 2 last week. So man of the match, best player. David McDade scored 2, but he scored 1 and was brilliant in the game. I thought he was man of the match, right? He loses him, but he couldn't call the game off because he only had 1 selected for the under-19s, right? What I would say, he was probably of more value to Glenavon, missing Glenavon yesterday, than Liam Burt for Lan.
So
is that?
Yeah, no. Well, this is the question.
Fair comment.
No. I would say yes. I would agree with that. And fans are looking at this now, thinking so every time a youth player, and sometimes these players are bench players for teams. Yes, you can say McGovern is there, right? So a team, and pick it out whoever you want it to be. Team X, whole game's off because they're 17-year-old left back or 19-year-old, backup right winger.
There is, I get that, yeah.
So
if we just call all the games off, right, then there's no argument. And then if you're a full international or an under-19 international, right, that we're not discriminating against anybody here. Because, right, I bet you the club that has the sub-left back, right, that, as you said, gets called off, right, it won't be their fans that complain. It'll be somebody else's fans that are saying that's not fair. Isn't it? Because everybody wants to look after themselves, right? So instead of everybody looking after themselves, the league make the decision and say, international break, instead of going, who's going to be playing there, right? We've 2 games isn't good enough. That's not a league weekend for me, right? So Portadown played Bangor, no international players, right? And Glenavon and Crusaders, and Glenavon did have because Paul McGovern missed, right? But they're the only 2 games on this weekend. It's not a great look for the league, let's be honest. So why don't we just say, it's international break, right? And everybody knows where they stand. Fans, players, staff, managers, the whole heap. Instead of, I think the Linfield game was called off real late this week because Isaac was called up last minute. I think Sean Brown was already in the squad. And then Isaac was maybe drafting due to an injury. I don't know the circumstances. That's Tommy's decision, right? So then that game was called off. But if it was the international, right, it don't matter who gets called up, right? There is no game anyway, and everybody knows where they're at within football, right? And you know what else that'll do then? It creates natural breaks in the season, right? Where clubs will be complaining, heavy pitches, injuries. We're at that stage. I don't like the international break, right? Being honest, I'm bored sitting here now, right? I've got the
We
darts
could all
on,
go
stuck on
watch the
top
under
of me.
14s play instead.
Yes. So my argument isn't an argument. I'm just saying, if we're getting to the stage where there's somebody getting called off, let's just the league take the decision, right? And let's just call it and say, right, we're having an international break.
So in short, you back and support the clubs,
I think so.
even
Yes.
if it's
Of course
youth
I do, yeah.
internationals.
Because if he's a player within that first team squad, then yeah, because you're missing him. I don't.
But
And I know it has to be two or more at under 21 and under 19 level, but that's not fair. On the likes of Glenavon yesterday, I felt bad on Michael O'Connor.
but does the league not differentiate this already? That you can have as many youth players as you want, but you can only have so many. It's above the age of 21, like men players.
It's a 25-man squad. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
you can have 25. You could almost describe every player.
So if
every player under 21 as a free hit, and if you have them there, great. If they're not there,
Yeah.
tough. You've got 25.
so this is what I'm saying. The club shouldn't be getting penalised then, right? Because they're trying to produce homegrown players for our international team,
Yeah.
right? And when I say our, that's not nine. My international team's Wales, just in case. But he wasn't sure we won last night, so we're 1 foot in the door for the playoff spot. So.
There it is. From banger to banger, eh?
Is right.
Okay, so you back that. It'll be interesting to see how fans feel about that, because I think this week has ended up being the one that finally pushes that forward. In a world where we have a totally 3G artificial pitch country throughout the league, throughout all of the training facilities and all, is that bad for our young players trying to play at the level that
Yeah, it is. Because they're not used to playing on grass, which is strange, isn't it? Now we were out in Bosnia.
they're like the cows that come out of the sheds in spring, and they're like, whoa, what's this?
Yeah, they don't really know, and the pitches were bobbling, bumpy, and and they're not used to it because they're used to playing on 3G and 4G pitches, right? And this is something completely off topic, really, but it's on topic. They don't know what metal studs are, right? So for the listeners, like proper football boots, as I would call them, with metal studs, playing on grass, you need them because you're going to slip and slide. But because the parents are probably paying £200 for a pair of boots that are for 3G, 4G, AstroTurf as for those of an older age, right? Them boots are no use when they go on grass. But if I was a parent and I'd went and spent 200 odd quid on a brand new pair of my boots for my son, who used them 4 times a week on the AstroTurf on the 3G, then I've got to spend another £200 now to play one game a season on grass. But I guess what happens at first team level, you play a lot of games on grass. And if you go to England, all of them are on grass because that's where football's played there. I suppose, how many teams in the league now play on 3G?
Well, it's probably easier to say the ones that are on grass. Linfield's grass, Oval's grass, Shamrock's grass, Glenavon's grass, although I think both Portadown and Glenavon are maybe keen. I don't know how much of that is like, they're both keen. Glentoran is looking to go 3G as well. Potentially, Carrick is going to have to stay grass. Ballymena, although a couple of years ago that was potentially a push. So it's really
Carrick.
Yeah. So it's very
50-50, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it might be more. So then, like this academy, which you talk about up at Campbell College, this new training facility up in Ballymena. So they're going to be grass pitches, aren't they? Because the whole aim is to get these players across into other teams across the water.
Well, no, the academy trains at the Welders on the 3G there.
Oh, okay, well there you go. So then eventually, so what do you do?
Well, the thing is, then you'd rarely get a session called off, right? Which is a positive for them. There's a value in them, no doubt. There's a massive value in them, and certainly for training. But I'm not that much of an old school purist where I say football should be played on grass at 3:00 because the world changes. It's something that we have to move with. I do think there needs to be a set standard of 3G pitch. I look at some of them about the league and I'm going, they're terrible. You'd be as well playing on a car pack, but I am not in charge of the finances of these football clubs to upgrade and upkeep them because I know it's an awful lot of money. But there is a value in them, and you can see why clubs want to do it because it means they're guaranteed their own training facilities and different things as we spoke about earlier.
Well, we will go to a 3G pitch or whatever technically the surface is in North Belfast to start our first game of the weekend. Crusaders Glenavon. Yes. This was a huge game at the bottom of the table here. I mean, the Crews have been on a horde run, added in that extra pressure by the fact that they have played so few games to other teams for whatever reasons that may have come up. So you have
international breaks.
Yeah, Shakes fist. Now, Glenavon come into this game off the back of a win. Hey ho, maybe this revolution could come round. You have Crews, the pressure's at home. They need to get a result here. They have not been good at home, and it's the man who is now, I think, top of the goal scoring charts after this performance. Fraser Bryden does the business. 4 goals, 4-1 for the Crews. Maybe this might be this little bright spark against the, well, base of the table, the worst team in the league. This is a huge result for Declan Caddell.
Massive, and he needed it. But look, you speak to people. Obviously, I'm in football, and I speak to people regularly, and everybody that I'm speaking to kept telling me, "Oh, Crews don't deserve to be where they are. They're a better team than that. They play some really good football." And like, it's a cynical point of view from me, I suppose. You are where you are in the league. There isn't a case of, oh, it's like a cup game, right? You could be the best team and get beat, and you're out the cup, and everybody goes, you're unfortunate. In the league, the way it is, you play everybody, you play home and away, all the rest of it, right? You are where you are in the league. That's where you deserve to be, because you can't be that unlucky 15 times out of 15. It's just the way it is. So to see him do that, and I think he's done really well, Declan. He's changing the profile of their football club, isn't he? We talked about Stephen earlier and the way it was, and he had built success there over years and stuck low. But now, Declan's had to start all the way again. He's gone with a younger profile of player. He's brought in a lot of boys from Scotland. It's like a little bit of a hybrid model. He has half of them training full time and half, still doing the evening stuff. But they've always looked very creative. And look, for anybody to score for, be top of the league in the position there in the league, he's obviously an asset for Declan at the minute. And he had it with Kieran Offord last year, didn't he? So I always look at managers, right? And I think he's obviously working really well with them, because he's getting centre forwards in that are scoring goals. And then he's lost Kieran Offord, he's brought him in, he's scoring goals. So clearly he has a style of play that suits centre forward. So if I'm a young centre forward now, I'm not saying that Bryden's going to go anywhere, or anything. I'm not. But if and when he does move on, I would be thinking, geez, I wouldn't mind to go at that club, because he's got him a move. This boy's come in and he's got 15 already this season.
Well, it's
14. It's a lot, and I know 4 of them were yesterday. But
it's very, very impressive. I thought Brooks was going to be the player that was going to come in, especially off the back of early season. He was going to be the man. Dunlop has also flashed, but clearly the most important thing is, and this is what you built your career on, Mr. Tipton, was being the man to stick it in the back of the net. Now, I think if we're talking about intangibles, I think this guy, Bryden, has them. He's a big, tall, lanky fella, can play wide, nip in. He clearly is being able to ghost into the box very, very well. Now, he's up against the worst defence in the league, but let's not... Everybody gets to go against this side, of course, bar Mr. McGovern, who was out and about. He can't play against his own back line. But look, as a side...
Well, last week, though, that back four contained Patrick Hoban, who's probably, in my eyes, the best centre-forward in the league. And they done really well against him. Harry Murphy and Kyle. I was going to call him Kyle McLean then, but...
McLeod.
I can't think of his name. Kyle McLeod, sorry. Apologies, Kyle, if you're listening. I forgot your name. But you done really well last week, and you got a great header yesterday. So, it's not like they can't do it, that back four. They just need to do it more consistently now.
But that's... Patrick Hoban, who isn't going to break through. Like, you see that last goal, he pretty much runs half the pitch, and he's able to outwit a player and still nick it in. Hoban's a very different style of player, and I did think going into this game that this was going to potentially be a really bad style matchup for Glenavon, and I still think, for Crusaders, their problem is clearly at the back. They have went young, and with that comes naivety. It comes maybe a physical disadvantage, maybe just the perhaps just not being totally, you can come in and out of games at that age, but, to have Bryden, and the difference between Bryden and Offord is that Bryden is a contracted Crusaders player, so... Yes,
as opposed to a loanee.
No, you can't always get these players in and sign them, and every players, as we talked about there, they're the players, there's a risk with every contract you've given out, but Crusaders have had to take a step back, And with that, they're trying to rebuild the club again to try and be a force. Now, they don't like to be where they are on the table, but a part of that business model, and you've had to do this as a manager, is you bring in a player that score loads, you fire them out, and you turn him into maybe two. And lather, rinse, repeat is the aim.
Yeah. And if that's their model, they're going to have to, Declan will have to stick to it. And sometimes it's
Cruise fans are saying no, he's staying with us forever. He's the
no, yes, but the problem is that's unrealistic. I'm not sure if it is. Look, if they can build it and they be successful, he manages to keep all these young lads together. That in turn will bring success down the line. But we all know the nature of football. We've spoke about it. I don't know how long we've been on for. Money, right? And if somebody comes in with a decent money offer, the suits and the men above will look at it and go, do you know what? We maybe cash in now, like you say, because we can maybe bring two in there with that money, and that two becomes four becomes eight, and all the rest of the maths out. We don't need to listen about on a podcast. So Declan's job now is to make sure they're getting the most out of him for as long as it lasts. If it lasts for 10 years, then brilliant. It probably won't in modern day football. Let's be honest.
So then, looking at the Crews, they'll want to keep this team together. Maybe there's been a few injuries, like Ross Clark's been out for a while, Forsyth's been out long, so clearly it hasn't exactly went to plan, and now they get this win. They've now jumped above Portadown, who are now dropped down to 11th. That they'll want to use, just get a bit of momentum and shake it off. You know a bit about young players scoring goals for your team and being near that part of the division. What is Cadell saying to Bryden? Is he saying, look, you've got a team around you, stick with us, and the move's going to be there? Or how do you keep this momentum ticking over?
Goals are your currency. That would be what I'd be saying. Goals are your currency, right? Whether we move you on or somebody comes in for you, right? The more goals you score, the more successful you'll be for both us and yourself, because people might look at it and go, we're not too sure. He's only had a quarter of a season. We need to keep monitoring him, right? But if he keeps scoring enough goals and he's on 20 come sometime in January, he has to keep scoring them goals. One, the club will get a bigger transfer fee for him, and he'll also command bigger wages because he's scoring the goals. I know people might not like to hear this, right? But that's what happens in professional football, right? You're in it to make money. Players are there to make money. And this is, go back to what we said earlier, is it better or not? This is what happens. The more professional you get, the more cynical football becomes. So as a manager, then you're saying to him, you keep scoring for the team, because the team will be doing okay, better, well, delete as applicable. And for yourself, if you keep scoring and you do leave us, you'll get a better contract elsewhere.
There's been,
and unfortunately, right, whether fans don't like that, because fans with their club forever, the fans don't get a better offer to go to a different team. That's really unfortunate nature of being a football fan, right? That's your team and that's your team for life. You don't swap if somebody offers you more money or more success. That's your team, right? As a football player, football manager, football industry, if you get paid more or offered more, the opportunity for more success, i.e. you go into a club from the bottom half of the table to the top half of the table, so you're going to win a Copper League, and that also obviously brings financial incentives if that's your way inclined, right? That's what happens. People don't like that. Football fans don't like that. They just think, right, every player should be with their club forever because that's what they do as fans, right? But in work, if this was, you work for Asda, right, and Tesco will offer you the job on double your money or 50% increase in your money and a higher position in the company, well, every fan would go and do that in their real life, right? And in football, well, when I say every, some people might not, because 95% of people will. And so what you have to do is get the best out of him while you have him, right? If I'm the manager of him, I'm saying, keep you scoring the goals because that'll help us as a football team. And we want the best for you because when you came here, develop your career, like Declan's doing from the outside looking in, a lot of these young players, he further their career. Turn, that's helping him as a start of his managerial career to be higher up in the table. Yesterday's win might kickstart that for him. I don't know.
Well, I think all the eyes are on him. I think you see some of the success. He's off the boil a wee bit here that Offord had. If you're comparing Offord to Bryden, slightly different, but maybe the
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think maybe the goals for Bryden is pushing a lot of weight behind him, but I think I don't know. But I just remember seeing Offord last year for the Cruise, and I just thought this boy as an attacking threat. Every time I watched him, I'm like, he would scare me if my team was against it. And there's very few players in the league that could do that.
No, do you think he
hasn't shown it as much in a blue shirt?
There we go, right? Do you think Kieran Offord was a lot more off the cuff for the Cruise, right? And they could pretty much play him as a lone striker, give him the ball, and he would go and create something by himself? Would that be fair?
Like if he had this supporting cast at the top end of the pitch,
yeah,
I wonder what it'd be like.
Yes, because where now they look like they're more organised as a front unit. Right, so they're building up off Bryden, right, and he's managing to get on the end of things, but they've got maybe 2 or 3 around him. When I looked at last year, and it looked to me when the ball was up and then Offord was off the cuff, he just done what he done, which was brilliant stuff, right? He produced moments of magic. He created things for himself from nothing. Where when I look at him in the Linfield team, more structure, right? We're going to go back to it again, more structure, right? Patterns of play, set positions on the pitch. When the ball's here, this is where you need to be, right? I know we're not on video here, right? So there's no point me going and get my tactics board up, but basically more professional the club is, right? When one person doesn't do the role, the whole thing breaks down and it actually looks worse than when everybody's playing off the cuff.
Well, at the minute, you have O'Connor who's come in and he's had, maybe a month or so at Glenavon, and he's got 2 victories, which is a lot more than what they had before he came in. And he's probably doing what you've had to do, where you come into a team and you try and figure out, how can I get the best out of these players? How do I add structure? Maybe you would say remove structure and try and get the best out of players who can significantly impact the game. Looking at that squad, where they are in the position that they are, where do you sit on it's already potentially over for them?
Oh, it's never over, is it? Let's be honest. But
no, it's not. But I mean, they're 10 points off Portadown here, who are 11th.
I think,
and
they made a lot of signings in the summer, didn't they? And not a lot of them have worked. I'm not talking out of school here, because I don't know the ins and outs. All I can look at from the outside, right? I think Michael's dealing with a lot of injuries. He's come in, and his boys, that are out, that are maybe big signings, big money for them. That's a problem for him. If we go last week's game and yesterday's game, reasons why they were so good last week and why obviously they were hammered yesterday. I covered the game last week against Glentoran. Being structured and organised off the ball is fairly easy to do, right? They expected Glentoran to come at them so they could be organised, disciplined, and then they had a way of playing on the counter-attack, okay? And it worked brilliant. It worked with T. I heard Andrew Doyle on his interview after the game. He said they'd worked on it and it came down exactly what they'd practiced on the Thursday night, came into fruition on the Saturday. They go to Crusaders yesterday, who are the team just above them, 6 points ahead, maybe. So, in football parlance, anyway, it was a 6-pointer, wasn't it? We love that terminology, right? We've got to go there and we've got to get a result. We've got to win. We've got to be front foot. They looked wide open to the counter-attack yesterday. Now, I didn't watch the full 90 minutes to see the highlights, right? But every time they turned over the ball, they looked so open and exposed. Because it was 2 different styles of football. If he'd have went and sat behind the ball yesterday, right, would it have worked? We don't know, do we? Because that's, unfortunately, we can't rewind and say, can we have another go at that game? But Crusaders, one thing they have is pace, and they exposed them. Because looking at Glenavan's back 4, I'd say one thing they're not blessed is, and I'm not being harsh, I know young Harry Murphy came through at Portadown when I was there. Big Kyle. Obviously now Quinn's, at that stage of his career, and they didn't look to me like they're comfortable defending that high up the pitch yesterday. My opinion. Could be completely wrong. They got beat 4-1, so I might not be wrong.
It's a good momentum boost for the Cruise. 2 wins in a row. They move off 11th. They're able to move off 11th. And the key thing here as well is that they have 2 games in hand over the 2 teams that are below them. Portadown and Glenavon.
And psychologically, it's big, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I know 11th isn't a relegation place, but it's a playoff place, and you don't want to be in that position. Like I say, psychologically, I think it'll be big for them with a young squad.
Well, they slip above Portadown on goal difference. It may have been by points if the Ports weren't able to get a point against Bangor. You might maybe frame this better, is that Bangor were able to come back and get a point. Michael Clark said before the game, and if you look at the players, about how Portadown looked to have went to a back three or a back five, whatever you want to call it, which is maybe to try and fix up their own defensive problems outside of Glenavon conceding the 4 there on Saturday. They had kind of the joint worst defensive situation, and I guess based on the first half, you may say it was working well enough. They go into halftime 1-0 up, and I've particularly found this season that, I know it's probably true in most football games, but this season more than ever, I feel like whoever scores first is winning these games. Very few teams are really coming back, particularly for Glenavon. They seem to be strong for a while. A goal goes in and then it all capitulates. And probably the bonus against Glentoran 2 weeks ago was that they go 2-0 ahead and then they can hold it, right? So Portland goes 3 at the back. It looks all good. The goal for Bangor is not great viewing from a Portadown perspective. This comes off the back of losing to Anna United in one of the, whatever the regional cup is there.
Middlester Cup, yes.
They lost in Uri. Like, it just, if you, outside of that Linfield victory, it's been a tour time.
Cliftonville. Great result at Cliftonville.
So they have those two victories. You look at just the league there. Was it 3 losses and then that draw against Bangor, probably a competitor when it comes to this mid-table muddle it was called by Mark McQueen last week. But at home, and they've had a couple of really difficult games in the league that they played against the top 4. Yeah. They're now 11th, and you've probably got to say fair based on results.
Well, I've already said it once. I can't then defend them because it's my old team. But yeah, results don't lie in this league. And I'll be honest, right? I'm not one for constantly looking at the league table. I didn't realise Portadown were 11th. I was saying I think they've had a reasonable start to the season. Clearly, I'm wrong because, you look at brilliant result against Linfield, brilliant result at Cliftonville. There was a couple of other decent results, mixed in there, but obviously it's not been consistent enough. I genuinely didn't know that was where they were until you brought it up here, and I had to quickly flick at the Sunday Live while you were chatting because I wanted to make sure that in terms of the system, and I get why you could maybe think it was a 3, and it might have been. I didn't watch the game, so I'm not saying that it was definitely that, but certainly from bits that I did see, it looked to me like Lee had played further up, and he could have just been as an attacking wing back. I have no problem with that. But I certainly thought it was 4-3-3, but I could be wrong. But look, obviously Niles had a little bit of upheaval in the backroom staff with Cliffy and John going to Dundela there. But that was only a month ago, was it? So it's not like that's been, the whole season. So I actually think they'll be okay, Portadown, but they do need to start picking up more wins, I suppose, over the next little period. I looked there as well, just prior to coming on and looking at the run of fixtures they've got coming up, and I think there's more winnable games in them in the next 5 or 6. They certainly be targeting some points there.
Well, Crusaders are above them just based on goal difference, but they've played 2 games less. Carrick, 3 games less. I think they face off next. Same amount of points. And then Cliftonville, 18, only played 13. Ballymena, 19, 15 games. Yeah. Bangor, 15, 20 points. They might see it as 2 points lost, but they're going to switch to the Bangor perspective. And another great points builder. Maybe they'll feel as though they, it checks off 2 losses in a row in the league. It's away from home against a team who you wouldn't want to give 3 points because then they're climbing up, snapping at your heels within. I know they've played one more game than you, but it's still 1 point behind you. And yes, there's plenty of other similar matchups between these sides. Glenavon will play the Cruise maybe 2 more times. Bangor and Portadown may do it again. So they've got a chance to be pinned back, let's just say. But were you talking about teams that are either playing too conservatively or don't have enough chaos or players that can make the difference? They've got a one-man difference maker who I often think when I watch Bangor plays to a certain extent with a bit of chaos to him. Ben Arthurs. He's
a handful, isn't he?
He's a handful, and I imagine that's very frustrating from a Bangor point of view. If he's not getting those balls, if he isn't getting the supply, if he isn't just getting the best of a man, but when he can turn it on, and he has that light switch that can to be turned on. He just caught Stephen McCulloch on the wrong side, came in, and he was busting on goal. And yes, it took a couple of bites of the cherry to knock it in, but he
Yeah.
has continued to be a problem at this level for teams up and down the division.
Well, I think that's his sixth goal of the season yesterday. But it's not just his goals; it's what he creates because he attracts defenders to him, and here we go. He's got a good touch for a big man. He's a lot more than just a head on a stick. His hold-up play, his movement in and around the channels is excellent. He's a really, really good centre forward at this level, and I'm surprised that nobody had took him from Bangor over the last couple of years. Because he was doing well in the Championship and in the PIL prior to that. And maybe teams did, and maybe he's happy. Maybe he's found a home for himself where he knows that the game's built up around him. I don't know that, the ins and outs of it, but I really, really rate him.
It's interesting you bring that up because you were talking about that. And I think Bryden, young player, 2021, clearly at the very start of his career, this is the early part of his success, and they'll want to move on, right? But you bring up Arthur's there. Like, of course, I've heard talk over the past number of years, contracts that have been offered, other teams bidding for him, and he's always stuck around with Bangor bait, mainly in the Championship where he could have jumped above. And now he's settled. Yeah. He's a main man, and he's at the absolute probably peak of his value so far. Now he's not 22-year-old. He's kind of up towards maybe 27 or so, maybe a year either side of that.
Yeah, 26, 27, yeah.
That's worked out for him. He's been able to have that stability. And we've seen plenty of players who flashed, have the skill. They maybe drop down from the top team to get first team football. It doesn't work out. Then they're always struggling to get that connection and get a side that is going to get the best out of him. And clearly, you see Mark Hockey, and even in those highlights, just ball, like he was just pumping it forward. I know there's Big Jed Boyd beside him as well. They're clearly trying to get as much out of them as possible. Do you look throughout your career, because you moved about quite a bit, and at any point now it's different circumstances, and you don't know what's behind the mystery door when you sign for a new club? That's what it's like in life and work. But do you ever look and go, maybe I should have just stuck around rather than chasing either the opportunity or the dough?
A lot of the time it wasn't up to me as a player. Team comes in for you, the buying club wants you, or the selling club don't want you. So you don't really, I don't think people understand that. You don't really have a lot of choice in football. You go to work on a Monday morning, manager pulls in the office and said, look, we've had an offer for you. You're free to go and speak to them. I don't want to go. Well, you're not getting a game here, so you go and speak to them. And that's it. Look, long and short of it, that is it. There's no, your contract ends, and if there's no deal, or you've got to go and find another club. So I would say all of my moves were made because I didn't have no other choice. Either my contract was up, or the contract was up and the club didn't want me, or I was mid-contract and somebody else did want me. You've got to then. You don't really have much choice in this life, unfortunately. As a football player, you're a commodity. You're told what to do and when to do it, and like it or lump it.
Well, he continues to be a very, I guess, sought after, or at least there'll be plenty of fan bases that'll be saying, why don't we get that boy?
Yes, 100%, yeah.
He's doing bits, and is that maybe what the success behind Bangor has been, or is at the minute this season, is that they've brought in experience was the thing that they've brought in to the side, and perhaps players that didn't really either settle in at other teams or at least are getting the best. Like Lewis Francis, for example, had a great season with Bangor in the Championship. He's been with Dungannon and Loughgall, and now he's back with them, and that's the type of players that they're going to need to get the best out of.
And when you look at the team, right, Bangor often change their team, their starting lineup, and Lee's managing to get the best out of everybody. So somebody's on the bench this week, they come in next week, they start, they do really well, and then it might be somebody else in and out. And he does that quite a lot, Lee, which it's a brilliant skill to have, because he's making sure everybody feels like they're wanted and they're valued in the team. And clearly everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, because you kind of look and you think, the more stable the starting lineup is, the kind of better and more successful the team will be. But Lee seems to be doing it, and he does chop and change quite a bit, but he's also getting a lot of success from that. So, I think he's doing really, really well with them. Now he'll be hoping that the momentum that they came up with like you said, they lost two on the bounce there. Yesterday rests that, and then he'll probably want another little run here. Well, he needs another little run because they don't want to, be drifting down the table.
Before we look ahead to this weekend's games, and we'll see how many last, whatever the next cold snap or rain is, I'm interested, Matthew, just in, like, I've heard you talk about your own career. You've had the odd issue with your knee, and kind of as you got it, like it's amazing to hear people who are look back and say, oh, I was, in my late 20s, and saying that you felt as though there was parts of your body that was done. Is there anything that you reflect on how particularly your youth career was, or how your early career went down, that you think you then take to the players that you're chatting to now? Like, I'm hearing there's youth players that get all these tests. You're thinking, what are you testing this from a 15 and 16-year-old? Like, hydration levels, like, what's going on? But, like, this is a long way of asking, do you think, are we playing our players too much, or have we learnt from this, and there's a certain level of football that should be played to kind of make these players have longevity?
A good player is a good player, right? We can put all the testing in places, hydration tests, everything else, right? A good player is still a good player. The problem we have, right? The problem is it's levels, right? So we have a level of player within this country, and they're only obviously playing against that level of player, right? One team might win every week, so they're not getting challenged. So that makes sense, right? Because they're really successful. I'm not knocking anybody that's successful. But then when they get put into an international program, or they maybe move to an England or Scotland, an academy level like that, there, everybody is at least that good, if not better. So then that happens, they break down because our players haven't been challenged enough to raise their physicality levels in terms of endurance output, speed. They're the things that you look at in terms of testing that are there. But ultimately, right, good players are good players, and the cream rises to the top regardless of everything else we do. Everything is there, right? The data, the science, the strength, the strength and conditioning, and all the rest of it comes, right? They're just add-ons to how good they are technically at football. The rest of it there. Some people, right, are really good at football, and their bodies aren't built to be footballers. Right, I probably put myself in that category now. That's a silly thing to say. I've played like over 500 games at professional level, so how could it not? Right, that doesn't. The guy had a certain level of ability, and obviously a physical ability that sustained that. If I was better physically, if my body was in a better shape in terms of my hips were a little bit more aligned and things, right, I probably would have played them 500 plus games, but at a higher level. Make sense? Right, so everybody, you have technical ability and whatever, and physical ability, and if they marry, you go on and become a top player. If you look at Wayne Rooney, he was probably done at 30. Was he? Michael Owen was done at 25, I want to say, because they were ready at 16 to go and do that, but the body can't sustain it for a longer period of time. What the job as a youth coach is to make sure that we don't overburden them, but we don't pressure them either, if that makes sense. There's a difference, right, between being injured and being sore and in pain. Do you get me? Right? And we need to educate. I'm not just talking about under 14s here. I'm talking about all levels of footballers, right? You have to realize that you're not going to be 100% working on the pitch at any stage in your career, right? You're going to be under a little bit of pain, right? It's how much pain is pain and how much pain is injury.
Yeah,
and mentally, are you strong enough? Now, this is a man that had to have a cortisone injection in my knee on Monday, right? Because pain is for weakness, right? As I was told 30 years ago when I started. So I just played all the time and I never wanted to be injured, right? Is it done me any good in the long term? I'm 45 now, probably looking at a new knee. I don't know about the hips.
Michael Carville's talking about to me on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, like hip replacement.
Hip, yeah, that's what I mean. So I need them as well, but I'm just trying to avoid that pain currently. So I don't know. Look, I could say 100 things on here and then contradict myself instantly because I know what I want and what should happen, but I also know that reality of life is different than that.
So when you're chatting to these, you said children, young people who are clearly at a certain age level elite or the best of their area, and maybe this changes every year they go up. how much of it is carrot and how much of it is stick? I know there's a
For me,
balance. I know there's a balance.
it's all carrot. I don't I don't hit kids with a stick.
But you're not barking, going, "Come on,
Um,
lads! The
no,
commitment isn't here. The fitness isn't there. What are you doing? Not working on
look,
tactics."
they're in a privileged position to be invited into the program. If they let themselves go physically, that they should know that they'll see within their performance reviews. The days have gone of just shouting at children. Now, we want to encourage them to be the best that they can be. We can offer guidance, we can offer encouragement to do that if we feel like you say, the fitness levels or the standards have dropped off, right? There's better ways to do it than shouting at them and saying, yo, run around the pitch, or whatever way, we can encourage that. I would hope, I don't know, somebody might come here, one parent might see me coaching the kid and say, he does nothing but shout at my child. I think I always try and offer guidance, an arm around the shoulder. But you know what I'm saying?
Aye, well, this is because
I think,
we in the Irish League, and maybe you've touched on a few of them. I feel over the past 20 years, my time watching it, we have been littered with brilliant talents who just either
yeah.
didn't have the mentality or maybe just didn't have the dedication or the attitude to help them get to that next level. Are you not seeing that, or is the game so competitive that you just don't have a huge amount of time for players who might be this physically gifted? If they're not willing to dedicate themselves at a certain point, you go, well, we'll cut you loose no matter how great you are on the ball.
So if I think that they're not applying themselves to 100%, then at 14, if they're of the attitude that they don't have to work as hard as everybody else, they probably wouldn't be in the program anyway. At 14, let's be honest, right? They shouldn't have been affected by too much outside influences in life, whereby you're talking about Irish League level, right? And you're saying, right, there's a boy, he's a man, whatever, and he's tremendous ability, but he looks like, he doesn't really want. Maybe he's had knockbacks in his life. Maybe he set off to be a professional footballer, international footballer, wanted to play in the World Cup, the Champions League, right? And he's had a couple of knockbacks, and maybe he went to England and it didn't quite work out, and he came back, so that's the first knockback, and then he's gone, I'll go back, and he's played here for 2 or 3 years, maybe knocking his pan in, training every day, didn't work out, and now he's kind of found the life balance of, I've got a job and I'm playing Irish League football and I'm kind of happy enough with what I'm doing, but I can't really push myself anymore physically because I'm working 9 to 5 and then going straight there, right? So there's loads of different factors for first team players as for that reason. What you as a fan perceive as lack of ambition or lack of physical output, right? Because you see him in the stand, but being a player and a manager and a coach inside the dressing room, we understand there's loads of things. In terms of the young children, we have to instill in them the good habits, right? That eat the right things, prepare the right way, do the right work outside of the program within their clubs, which is the biggest for them because they see them more than we do. Hopefully their coaches are passing that advice on. Everything you do, right, is coming from the right place. It should be anyway. As a coach, right, I'm not there for me. I'm there to try and help these young kids progress, right? My ego doesn't need filling by success of the young children, right? I've had my ego fill, right? I can go back and look at my career and go, all them goals, all them appearances, everything I've done, right? If I really needed my ego filling, that's that for me, right? As a coach, my ego is parked. I don't have one because I want to do the best for the kids. So everything I'm telling them is for them and them alone, right? If they take it on board, brilliant. Hopefully it helps them. If they don't take it on board, I can only help, can't I? I can only try. I can only say, look, make sure we're on time. We've clean boots. All the little tiny things that you're trying to put good habits into them at the start, hopefully of a long, successful career. What my coaches told me when I was their age, it's still the same things. What I was told them, be respectful to your peers, to your coaches, to your parents, thank them for bringing you because it's a big sacrifice for them. We're getting them for minuscule amount of time. If I see them for 2.5 hours a week, right, that's not a lot of time, is it? Let's be honest, right? So that's like 1/10 of a day, right? 1/10 of one day of the week, right? So out of the whole week, it's 1% of their week I'm seeing them fucking in general, right? So the other 99%, we're hoping that the 1% we're giving them they add into the 99% of their life that will help them. And it might not make them professional football. It might not make them play for Northern Ireland, but if that can guide them down the right paths in life as well as football, I think that there's some value in that somewhere along the line anyway, I hope.
We'll look ahead to this weekend. All 6 games, all going well. 2 on the Friday, 1 being televised. Let's see if we can get a bit of restructuring done to the Glentoran pitch. See if it's still in working order by then. I mean, they're going up against a side who usually plays on a perfect surface and are actually probably built for that. Glens against a Swift side who have really found their mojo again in the past few weeks. Poor result before the either enforced or just happened to come their way international break. They go up against the Glens, who are looking to bounce back from their loss against Glenavon. I mean, this is probably an important game for the Swifts to see how much they can get themselves close to that top 4 pack.
Yeah, I actually covered the last Dungannon and Glentoran game down at Stanmore. I was doing that for the BBC a few weeks ago, and I thought Dungannon were absolutely superb that day. And Glentoran didn't know how to cope with them. They couldn't work out what they were doing in terms of their midfield rotations.
Their midfield is just manic sometimes in a very good way. Like,
yes.
You talk about overcoaching. I think that's at midfield that's coached to do.
Oh no, 100% is. You can see exactly what they were working on. You could see it from, obviously we're in the commentary position. I could see what they were doing, how they were doing it. Sometimes they would have one sitting in front of the back four and the other 2 would go and play on the backside of the Glentoran midfield, which makes it difficult to pick up who picks them up. Defenders, did the midfield drop off? If the midfield dropped off and got goal side to them, it then enabled them just to bounce the ball around and get it wide. And they kind of played with split strikers, I would call it, right? So basically, instead of one straight down the middle, they played 2 centre forwards, like in between Glentoran centre halves and fullbacks, right? So whenever they won the possession, if Glentoran fullbacks were pushing up, they had 2 outlets quickly in the channels, right? It was really good. It was great to watch, and the Glens really struggled that day. Now it'll be different because they're playing at the Oval, but the bigger pitch might actually suit Dungannon there. And then the Glens have obviously had a lot of stop-start, haven't they, over the last month to 6 weeks. They got to the top of the league and they were flying, but since then they've been a game on, a game off, game on, game off, and they've lost a couple. Like I said, they lost that one. They lost last week at Glenavon, so definitely be looking for them to get back into a bit of rhythm.
It's also the junior revenge game. Can he go up to the Glens? And I know he didn't, score Matthew Tipton level of goals in a Glentoran shirt, but he still scored a couple, and he's been doing some decent things for the Swifts.
He was very good for Dungannon that day. Really, really good, to be honest. He held the ball up, but like I said, he played in that split role and he was pushing out wide and running at them, and he done really well. I thought he was super. So yeah, it'd be good, interesting to see.
I'm going to be boring, even though there's only been 9, I think, across the league so far. I think this could be a 0-0, 1-1 game, which probably adds to the fact that maybe Glentoran are just kind of in a bit of a mini rut. But here, if they get a goal ahead and try and hold back the might of the Swifts, maybe they could get something more.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at it, Jordan Stewart be back. Obviously, he played half a game at Glenavon, but he'll have had another 2 weeks training. There's a couple of others that I think were making their way back as well. So that little break might have helped them. Obviously, with the game on Friday night being called off. If you're looking at a prediction off me, 2-2.
Yeah, I think
there might be goals in it.
Well, yeah, it could just be Friday night. Glens being a bit tetchy. Glens need to score, and I would say early. For sitting here 60 minutes into the game without a goal, that's where the worrying concern is for the Glens, and I think it has been all season really.
Let's be honest. If there's not a goal in 15 minutes, the Oval crowd turns on the Glens quickly. It's fact, isn't it? Everybody knows it within the league. You got to keep the Oval, the Glentoran home fans quiet. If you can frustrate them for 15 to 20 minutes, they quickly turn on their own team. So,
well, I remember seeing this game last season at the Oval, and outside, who was it? Amos? He just hit a thunderbolt. That's what kind of won the game, but it was not a good sight. Now, for some reason, I think that could be a repeat this time around, particularly on a flood, a floodlit game there on a Friday night. Lauren, I mean, their fans are quite forgiving on a Friday night and usually do quite well.
Mm.
Add in the fact that they're playing against the bottom side in Glenavon. I mean,
Yeah.
I made this mistake a couple of weeks ago saying it's how many for the team playing against Glenavon, but I do think this is how many Lauren score.
Yeah, they've looked really good going forward as well, haven't they? Obviously, Gary Havens took the job on full time. I know he's been in charge for more than the majority of this season, and I think they're doing really well so far, and he's doing a good job with them. So, look, Michael will go there. It's a case now, right? Because I think if you look at the games after that, and I know we're previewing this coming week's games, but I think after that, Glenavon play Bangor and Carrick are the next two after that. I don't know. Obviously, this is up to Michael what he does with his team, but I think he might have one eye on them two games down the line and maybe see what he gets from this game, right? It's something I never did as a manager, and maybe I should have more. I thought I could win every game, and then I would maybe go to these type of games, end up getting beat, with a last minute goal, and maybe lose four players because they were absolutely punctured, and then go and get beat in the more winnable games, if you like. So he possibly might go down that route. We don't know. I think he might do what we chatted about earlier, what he done against Glentoran. Be solid, hard to beat, playing the counter attack, and then let's take what they can from the game.
If we look at last week, seeing that Glenavon going away from home, playing on a 3G pitch, were eventually outdone by runners and nice passing at the top end of the pitch. O'Connor, McKendry, maybe Lusty. This is not the type of front line. Whatever concoction of them are starting, maybe add in Paul O'Neill, but he's not particularly the man to, brush off a defender and run 20 yards and then slot it in. I still think the three players I mentioned there, that's not their style. So yeah, I don't think I'm being bold saying potentially 2-3-0. You're against one of the best teams in the league. Glenavon can dust themselves down. I think this is an interesting offering here because Ballymena, I mean, they were on a really torrid run when it came to results. They go away to Bangor and they get out of jail late by getting a late goal via some poor defending individual mistakes there, let's just say. They have a week off, and now at home they go against the Crews, who have won 2 on the bounce. A victory here for either side could really help their fortunes massively in that mid-table muddle.
Oh, definitely. Ballymena would be targeting it's a home game against a team that's below them. They'll be looking for 3 points. Again, inconsistency. They've been consistently inconsistent, haven't they? Let's be honest. Ballymena this season so far, and they've got players in there. They've got match winners. Jim will be looking to target this as a 3 points, and Declan will be hoping to continue his run. 2 good wins, 4 goals at home there, which they hadn't won all season. So now he'll be going away from home with a little bit more confidence in them.
I like the Crews here. I think momentum's there, and Ballymena in particular. I'm yet to see them really grab a game by the scruff of the neck and do it across 90 minutes. So I think particularly late on, I think Crews are going to win this 2-1.
Big call. I think 3-2 to Ballymena. There'll be goals in this game.
Oh, massive result. Yeah, I can see goals in here, particularly just due to those back lines, and also maybe either side chasing the game. Particularly, I think Crews could do well chasing it, but again, it's the fact that they've had to chase it, leave themselves open the back. That's been oftentimes the difficulty for them. I think this is a game we've all been looking forward to mostly this season. Bangor host the Blues. You were talking about difficult pitches earlier on. I'm not saying you're talking about Bangor, but many people have pointed to the Clandeboye pitch as one of them, and they have had decent success so far at home, be it just they know how to play there. Keeping Linfield shut for the first 45 minutes will be key here. But this is a fascinating one because it's a huge potential banana skin for the Blues, a Blues team who aren't playing, free-flowing football. Defensively, they're shaky. So they need to kind of start building up their momentum again.
Yeah, they definitely do. Bangor have a style of play that suits that pitch, let's be honest, right? They're fairly direct. They play enough Ben Arthurs and they get running. Look, I think Linfield will win, to be honest, but I don't think they'll get it easy there. Nobody's had it easy so far. Even last year in the cup competition, things Bangor done well. So, whilst I think it'll be a tough afternoon for them.
I'm trying not to be a contrarian here, but I think Bangor are going to win this one now.
Oh,
I think as much as they probably didn't play particularly well in that game against Portadown, I just think the break for Linfield is either going to provide them of two outcomes. I see it, and either they're going to be able to have dealt with all the issues that they've had, and then they're going to go out and be able to pick apart a back line of Bangor that I really do not think should work as well as it has, mainly just due to mobility. And I saw them against Crusaders play hockey and Owens, and I'm like, that shouldn't work at this level, particularly the speed that they have, but it has. So look, Bangor are going to put 30 men behind the ball if they can, and Arthurs is just going to cause a bit of trouble back there against the Linfield back line. And I think hook or by crook, we saw a bit of the game plan very early in the season of how they beat Cliftonville. And I think Arthurs is going to be difficult, and I think no matter what, he is going to get the best one-on-one against one of those Linfield centre backs who just have not been dominant in the way that they should be, and I think that's going to be the difference maker. And I'm going to go 1-0 Bangor.
I'd like to say Linfield's win.
And that would overtake the Blues in the table if that was to happen. So Bangor fans get excited. I've just gifted the Blues a 5-0 victory there. We'll have to see. We talk about a game that could be quite exciting. One that probably might be the least exciting of the weekend. Carrick Rangers host Portadown.
Yeah, it's well, Portadown need a result. Now that you're telling me that they're 11th and they've run, and this is one of the games that they'll be targeting, thinking, right, we've got to get a result. Stephen knows, clearly been a successful manager all his days, and they have a style and a pattern of play that seems to work for them, certainly at Taylor's Avenue. If Portadown had won yesterday, I'd have maybe backed them to get something there now, going back to his old club. But the fact that they conceded again and they missed a couple of decent chances, that you'd expect them to score from, I can't really look beyond a Carrick victory at home, to be honest. I think it's tough.
I think that adds so much heat to that situation in mid-Ulster. I appreciate you're someone that replaced Niall Curry many years ago, but like I think this is a huge game for Portadown because 16 points, they've played 3 games less than Carrick. Carrick win that, takes them up the 3 points above them with those games in hand. You could see that clearly Portadown didn't want to be in and around this relegation situation, and we've only had 16 games. But if you haven't beat Bangor there, I think they lost the Carrick a couple of weeks ago. At this, it's 0-0 for me. I'll just say it. I think it's going to be 0-0. But this is a real. As much as they've been missing a lot of key players, I think Portadown need to go out and attack this. I think Carrick can sit back and not worry and try and hope that their opposition makes a mistake, which they can capitalise on.
Yeah, possibly. What I would say, right, every time, if you've looked back over the last little period, when Portadown have needed a result, like when you say needed a result, or maybe they're not expected to beat Linfield, they beat Cliftonville. And that might be one thing that now will be using this week, boys. We've been sucked where we don't want to be. We're 11th. We need a victory here, bounces us up 3 places because it does when it's so tight at the minute. We've got to make sure we get that and get on the front foot and go. And whilst I think Carrick are going to win, it wouldn't surprise me if Portadown got a victory there.
Yeah, definitely a tight affair. And then finally, they used to be somewhat of a mini rivalry over the past couple of years, but obviously Coleraine looked to have a surge forward, and Cliftonville have regressed, in particularly the past 2 years as their takeover sits in limbo.
Yeah.
Cliftonville hosts Coleraine. I think, as much as Cliftonville looked to have somewhat turned it around with 1 or 2 results where they're unbeaten in 3 in the league, and they've slightly moved away from that 11th, 12th, 10th area which they're in. I mean, they're only a result away from dropping down back into it again. I think they could be very much overrun in midfield, and this could be a difficult afternoon.
Yeah, I said to you, I think Coleraine have been the best team I've seen this year, certainly live. The way they play, Patchin and Dylan Boyle in the middle with then Glackin, Cooper, and whoever plays off the right bit, McDonald. I just think they have that. They have that physicality, that presence. You mentioned it, referenced it in the middle of the pitch, and they've goals in their team, right? They've energy, they've pace in wide areas. So it's hard to look beyond Coleraine for me. Coleraine victory, and I think it could be comfortable enough, 3-0.
I think 3-1 maybe, 2-0. But yeah, Coleraine come back and they look to have been the most impressive side so far this season. It hasn't been a completely perfect
No,
run. How could it be with just the amount of players being brought in? And I know the manager came in
aye,
before the
one,
last
yeah,
final, games, but there's a chance here for Coleraine again to get a bit of. I don't know how much you think about it, but these teams playing each other so much, but it's slightly a bit of revenge from that European run. Maybe Cliftonville will try and trot out some of the tactics that got them victory there, but this is a different team.
6 months ago.
And, yeah, but also if we're talking about these top of the end of the table sides and being maybe, don't want to take your words out of context here, but, they're so caught in the system
Yeah.
and not being beat. How have Coleraine been able to be this total outlier, or is it just the money and the finances they've been able to bring in a quality of player that just is so exceedingly good, including someone who would be considered the best player in the league for the past few years in Joel Cooper, that they're just able to play to this high standard? Or do you see the way this team has been brought together, it's been brought together to try and play this way?
Yeah. When you bring in Joel Cooper, right, and you've got Jamie Glack and you've got Will Patchen, Matthew Shevlin, like I say, and they've two flying machines out wide on the right, it's hard to not be excited about them going forward. It does come from a solid base at the back. They've two good centre halves. Like I say, Dylan Boyle covers the ground for them, and the fullbacks that want to join in. So looking at it, why are they different than the other teams? Because they are built with so much firepower going forward, so they can afford to go for it, knowing that they've got good stability behind them. Some of the teams maybe don't have as much of that firepower, so that's why they're being built. Let's be more pragmatic and let's just grind out a result.
Matthew, I think you've had many debuts in your time across your career, both in management and on the pitch. That might be your finest one.
Do you think?
Late in the career, I thought it was sterling work. You worked the channels. You were clear in the analysis, and you were straight in.
It's longer than any game I've ever played.
Well, you let them know. You let them know you were there from the off, and that was very, very clear.
Yeah, I like it.
But outside of the coaching stuff, what other things are taking up your time?
Well, I've got something that hopefully you don't mind me speaking about. My youngest brother has set up a little community kind of project, I suppose. It's called Men Tribe. It's on social media, at Men Tribe, all one word. Basically, it's a space for men, right? He's set up like a little walking group with them, and it's been going over a year. He's won some awards and things. It's set up in Wales, but he's trying to branch out, and I've volunteered to start a kind of walking men's group in Comber. I'm hoping to do it next Monday, a week tomorrow, depending on obviously it's a bit of admin and things. And basically it's a place where men can come and feel safe to go and chat with other men. I think we lost a lot after the pandemic. People, and I'm not advocating everybody just goes for a pint all the time, but that kind of culture's disappeared a little bit. I don't think men have the space and the ability to just chat freely. We don't. Look, we all hear about these things, right? And everybody talks about it and, read about it. And there's a pandemic of mental health problems, not just in online, but worldwide, certainly amongst young males or males in general, So I just thought, look, I'd like to help him do that. And hopefully I've said the right things, because he did. I asked him to send me something earlier about what it actually was, because for me, I just think get people out, fresh air, chatting away, walking. People might not want to chat; they just might want to get out of the house and be amongst male company. So that's what it is, really. If anybody has any interest in it, follow the social media site. I have an Instagram account that I would use. It's at Matthew Tipton. People, if they're listening to this and they've any interest, they might follow me already. But certainly my brother's the one that has, he knows what he's doing. I'm just there to facilitate, hopefully organise and do things. And like I said, that's at Men Tribe. The idea of it, I suppose, look, it's a men's mental health and wellbeing community, bringing men together, supportive conversation, outdoor activities, right? And then what they've done in Wales so far is low-level walks, which is what I'll be doing. There'll be no mountains, pretty much. It'll be, if people know Comber, maybe along the Comber Greenway towards Billy Neal and back, a walk around the town. Maybe
no late fitness tests.
No, there'll be no. Look, it's for all shapes and sizes. This is not a physical thing. This is just purely getting out and about. But in terms of what he's done like mad things like the Welsh 3000s, climbed all the peaks and things. They were out for 24 hours climbing mountains. Like, I'll not be doing any of that. This is purely and simply just something when I think it'll help people. A walk and a talk, I suppose, is the short version of it.
Well, you talk about well-being there. It's not sometimes the crux of mental health, in the sense of, sometimes when we talk of any sort of like campaigns when it comes to mental health, it's like when things are in a certain place, then that where people need to take action or rely on a resource. A bit like maybe your own physical health, it doesn't always need to be in a place where you're trying to get out of something that's in a negative place. It's good to try and top up your mental health as well, rather than just having to change something where it's not in a good place.
Hopefully so, Peter. And what it is, like, I'm not an expert in anything. Let's be honest. Right? I just think if it helps one person, right? If one person turns up and it's just me and him that go for a walk, right, for 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever it may be, and that helps, like, job done. But I just think that it's something that can be done. And I think you said it there. It's always when it's right at the end of the problem. You get me? People then maybe making a plea for help, going to the doctors or whatever, right? But basically, what I'm trying to do is forget that. Let's not get to the end of the problem. Can we strip the right way back, right?
Going to this is not saying I am struggling with mental health. It's you saying this would help me in my overall.
Yeah, I think it helps, right? Because I know, being so physically active all my life, it does. I know them benefits, right? I'm not a mental health expert. I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just here to try and help. I know that the work he's done through his work, he's got them now running in 3 or 4 places within North Wales, right? That it has helped people. And I just said, look, I think it might help people here. I don't know, right? So I said, let's get it set up. He's doing the admin in the background. I'm going away tomorrow for a few days. And when I get back, hopefully it'll be sorted. If people are interested, somehow on social media, find @MenTribe. Like, that's what it's on Instagram. It's probably on Facebook and things, right? Find it. You might be able to see some of the videos of previous people that have been on it. You might think it's something that you're interested in. You might be fit and active already, but you just want to get out of the house because your wife annoys you on a Monday evening or something. There is no excuse. There's no major reason to do it or not to do it. It'll be something available to everybody. It doesn't cost anything. It's just getting out of the house for an hour. And like they say, if that helps people's mental health, so much better. Hopefully it doesn't damage them having to listen to me yapping, walking around. But all being well, it'll be kicking off very soon, like I say, in and around Comber.
Excellent. Sounds great. I'm sure if they've got to this point in the podcast, they don't mind listening to your dulcet tones, Matthew.
Hopefully
Thank
not.
you so much for all your time, all your insight, and I'm sure, well, fingers crossed, in a couple of years when there's somebody scoring a goal for the Northern Ireland men's team that helps us get through to some championship, you'll be sitting there, maybe here going, I taught that boy the 3 Bs. That was me.
I probably won't say that.
Look at that ball control.
Yeah, I will say, thankfully, I've had a little part in that journey, but I certainly won't be saying I taught him the 3 Ps. Somebody might say that along the line. I'll just be happy, like I say, if I do play one little part in the journey.
Matthew, thank you for your time.
Top man, thank you.
A very different guest on the podcast this week, a very enjoyable one. I don't usually have ex-players or ex-managers on, but I think, just like the one I did with Stuart King, Mr. Tipton, well worth the chats, was very free with his time and gave a plenty of opinions. I know people usually just say this, but genuinely, if there is someone that you think I realistically could ask and get onto this podcast to chat a bit about Irish League, interested in their insight on it all, let me know. You can email me via kickingmatch@gmail.com. You can also follow Kicking Match on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Subscribe to the podcast if you're on Spotify or are on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, unless I get a call up somewhere, I'll see you next week.